As King Charles III is officially crowned on the 6th of May, there's a lot of curiosity around the event, what's going on behind the scenes. There's also the question of what happens from here onwards. We have been getting you a range of voices here in London. We're also talking to experts to take a closer look at the relationship between the UK and India. In fact, as we traveled through the streets of London, we also spoke to Geoffrey Van Orden. Who is he? Geoffrey Van Orden is a former British Army officer and a former member of the European Parliament. In fact, he spoke to us about Charles's love for India, also the contribution of British Indians to the UK, and his assessment of the UK-India relationship. Take a look at this exclusive conversation. With me right now in a very sunny and windy London is Geoffrey Van Orden. He is a former member of the European Parliament and a former British Army officer. Thanks very much for speaking to us here, Geoffrey, at a time when London is gearing up to host the coronation ceremony.
Very exciting and joyful.
Yes, give us a sense of the excitement and the enthusiasm on the ground. The very fact that this is a ceremony that's taking place after 70 years.
Exactly.
You know, a lot has changed since then, but the ceremony itself has not changed much in the past 1,000 years, but a lot has changed around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you're quite right. A lot of the elements of the ceremony have remained the same, the essential ingredients. But of course, the world around us has changed most enormously. I think there's great enthusiasm. I think King Charles is widely respected. He's a man of strong views and principles. In those 70 years when he's been the heir apparent, I think the longest heir apparent in British history, he hasn't been idle, he's been very busy. Many of the issues he talked about, he was ahead of his time.
Why do you say that?
A lot of the environmental issues. I mean, he came to the European Parliament, I remember, about 15 or so years ago, and he was talking about the devastation of the equatorial rainforests and the damage that was going to do to the global ecosystem. He's always been very concerned about the environment, and I think people are increasingly engaged on that particular issue. He's also, by the way, a great admirer of India. He practices yoga, meditation. He's a great supporter of Ayurveda. By the way, I've got a daughter who's an Ayurvedic physician here in England, Selina. He actually, when Prime Minister Modi came to London 5 years ago, they opened a research centre for Ayurveda at the Science Museum here. So that underlines his enthusiasm for things India. He's been to India 10 times.
Let's just also talk about the UK-India relationship. You yourself have spent so much time in India. Of course, you've also worked in India, and you've been talking about the time that you spent there as well. Tell us what.
Well, I first went to India in 1977.
Yes.
I was when I was a soldier, and I went to the Indian Staff College at Wellington, and we had this most wonderful, life-changing year. I have to say, it was. And my wife loves it. She thinks she probably had another life in India, a previous life, you know. All of our children, we have 3 daughters, all of our children all love India. They go there as often as possible. And over the years, we've been regular visitors. When I was in the European Parliament, I was chairman of the delegation for relations with India.
Right.
And all the time, I was seeking to promote, particularly, British-Indian relations. I've never been a great enthusiast for the European Union, but I think the British-Indian one is a very strong one. And I have to say, during my time there, I met very, very few Indians that didn't have feelings of affection and admiration for Britain.
Right.
Right? And I was very welcome everywhere I went. and my fellow officers, many of whom became generals in the Indian Army and now, like myself, retired from the army. But many of them said, "Oh, you're going to such a place. You must. My auntie lives there, or my grandparents live there. They'd love to welcome you," and all of that. So much friendliness and all that. Whereas back home, you're always these people who will find sort of scratchy aspects of the relationship. And now we've got this whole, the whole colonial period is something which is obviously controversial. But it's being exploited, I think, particularly in this country, for political purposes, today's political purposes. And I don't think it reflects the reality of those relationships and the reality of our history. And I think that period is something we should all be enormously proud of. We have a large number of people of Indian origin live here in the United Kingdom. And I'd like to think that they are living here with great pride in the country, which is their adopted country. Particularly now, we have a Prime Minister of Indian origin, for goodness sake, which shows how strong these bonds are.
And also the contribution of British Indians over here.
Absolutely. I mean, I drive a Jaguar at home.
Yeah.
Ratan Tata's owns Jaguar.
Yeah.
And other big chunks of industry here.
Right.
You have great people like Lord Moria and Cobra Beer and all these things. The Hindujas have a house just behind us here in Carlton Terrace.
Right.
There are a lot of Indians live here in London. They regard this London as a sort of second home.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.